It started with a wave. Nothing dramatic, just that small, reflexive thing you do when you catch someone's eye across the street. She was standing outside her house, watering the plants near the gate. I think she'd just come back from somewhere because her hair was still pinned up and a bit loose around the sides. I waved without thinking, the way you do when you've seen someone enough times to pretend familiarity. She smiled back. That was it. Or it should have been. A week later, I saw her again, this time at the small bookstore near the post office. I was sitting by the window, pretending to read something I wasn't going to buy. She came in holding a tote bag, and that same calm air around her, like she'd learned how to move through the world quietly. She didn't see me at first, but I watched how she folded her receipt before tucking it into her bag, how she paused by the counter like she'd forgotten something but didn't want to admit it. I don't know why I noticed those things, maybe because no one else did. When she turned and caught me looking, it wasn't awkward. She just smiled, small and polite, like she was used to people noticing but not staring too long. I nodded. She nodded back. And that was our second wave. Over the next few mornings, I kept seeing her, on her porch with coffee, or walking her dog down the street. We started exchanging quiet hellos. Sometimes she'd say, "Morning," and I'd echo it too softly, hoping she didn't hear how nervous I sounded. It wasn't attractive, not in the way people usually mean it. It was something gentler, something that felt like recognition, like she understood how silence could fill a day. One afternoon, it rained hard enough that the street went shiny and empty. I saw her through the window of her house, standing by the curtain, holding her mug in both hands. For some reason, I wanted to text her, even though I didn't have her number. My phone stayed in my palm anyway, the screen lighting up with nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how she'd looked at the sky that morning, how she always smiled before she spoke, as if weighing her words. I tried reading. I tried music. Nothing helped. At 1:47 a.m., I opened my window just to feel the air, and across the street, her living room light was still on. The next day, I ran into her again, this time at the cafe near the square. She was sitting alone, reading something on her phone. I hesitated before walking in, told myself it didn't matter, that I just needed coffee. When I passed her table, she looked up. "Oh, hi," she said, like we'd already been in the middle of a conversation. I smiled, tried to hide how fast my heart was beating. "Hey, guess we live at the same cafe now." She laughed, softly, genuinely. "Seems that way." I ordered, sat 2 tables away. We didn't talk after that, but there was something about the silence between us that didn't feel empty anymore. It felt aware. When she got up to leave, she hesitated by my table. "You always come here this early?" "Sometimes," I said. She nodded. "Maybe I'll see you again then." Then she walked out. I watched her cross the street through the glass, hair moving in the breeze, hand holding her book against her chest. And when she turned back once, just for a second, I didn't know whether to wave again or pretend I hadn't noticed. My hand twitched halfway up, but before I could decide, she smiled and disappeared into the rain. That night, my phone buzzed once. An unknown number. "You left your umbrella at the cafe." I didn't own an umbrella. The next time I saw her, it wasn't across the street or through glass. It was up close, the kind of close where you can hear someone's breath before they speak. I was walking home from the grocery store, arms full of things I didn't really need, when I heard her call my name. I didn't even know she knew it. "Hey, need a hand?" she asked, smiling from her porch. I must have looked ridiculous juggling 2 paper bags and my keys, so I nodded, half embarrassed. She came down the steps and took one from me. Her hand brushed mine, just a second, but it was enough to make every thought fall quiet. Inside, her house smelled faintly of lemon and old books, the kind of smell that belongs to someone who keeps their world in order. "Sorry," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "I was baking earlier. Got carried away." There was a tray of cookies cooling by the stove. I laughed lightly. "You bake when you're bored?" "Sometimes when I'm lonely," she said, then paused, like the word had slipped out by accident. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. She filled the silence by pouring tea into 2 mismatched cups. We sat at her kitchen table while rain started again outside, soft and steady, like a rhythm that asked for honesty. She told me she used to teach at the local school. "Quit a few years back," she said, stirring her tea even after the sugar was gone. "My son's in college now. The house is too quiet most days." I nodded. I knew her son. Not well. just enough to realize how strange this all was. She must have seen it flicker across my face because she smiled a little, without looking at me. "You're thinking it's odd," she said. "Your neighbor's mom, talking to you like this." "No," I said too quickly. "I just didn't expect it." She laughed softly. Neither did I. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where rain drew small rivers on the glass. For a while, we didn't talk. I just watched how she kept her fingers around her cup, never letting go even when the tea cooled. At one point, she asked, "Do you ever feel like some days just don't have anywhere to go?" The question caught me off guard. "Yeah," I said after a moment. "All the time." She smiled faintly. I thought so. There was something about the way she said it, quiet, knowing, that made it feel like she'd been waiting for that answer. When the rain finally stopped, I stood to leave. She followed me to the door, her arms folded loosely, expression unreadable. "Thanks for the tea," I said. "Thanks for the company," she replied, then hesitated before adding, "You can come by any time, you know. The door's usually open." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. As I stepped out, she reached forward, just to brush a crumb from my sleeve. The gesture was small, fleeting, but it left something electric in the air between us. She looked up, eyes soft, half smiling. "Take care of yourself," she murmured. I walked home slower than usual that night. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me that I didn't mean to go back so soon. But the week felt longer without seeing her, like a quiet room stretched across the days. I told myself I'd just return her baking tray. That was all. When she opened the door, her hair was still damp, like she'd just washed it. "You didn't have to bring that back so soon," she said. "I was passing by," I lied. She didn't call me out on it, just stepped aside and said, "Then come in for a minute." The house was dimmer this time. Afternoon light slanted through the blinds, catching dust in the air. The radio murmured softly from another room, a song I didn't recognize, but slow enough to make the silence in between us feel heavier. She poured tea again, no sugar this time. "You take it plain, right?" I hadn't told her that, but she remembered anyway. We sat across from each other, the table smaller than I remembered. She kept looking toward the window, then back at me, like she wanted to say something and couldn't find the right start. Finally, "My son's coming home this weekend," she said. I nodded, waiting. She hadn't texted in days. It shouldn't have mattered. We weren't anything, not really. But every time my phone buzzed, I found myself hoping it was her, even when I knew it wouldn't be. When I finally saw her again, it was by accident. Late afternoon, at the park near the river. She was sitting on a bench, half hidden under a tree, a book open in her lap, but her eyes somewhere far off. I almost walked past. Almost. She looked up at the sound of my steps, startled for half a second before her face softened. "You again," she said quietly. "Guess I'm predictable," I said, trying to smile. "You were gone," she replied. Not accusing, more like noticing. "I thought you wanted space." She nodded, closed her book carefully, like it mattered. "Sometimes I do. Sometimes I don't know what I want." We sat for a while, watching the water move. The air was cold, and the light was thinning out. That hour where everything feels slightly unreal. She was wearing a scarf I hadn't seen before. Something about it made her look younger. I caught myself staring too long. She noticed. "What is it?" "Nothing," I said quickly. "You just look different today." "Different good or different bad?" she asked, teasing, but her voice trembled on the edge. "Good," I said. Then softer. "Too good." She didn't laugh this time. Her fingers tightened on the edge of the bench. "Someone saw us," she said suddenly. "At the cafe last week." "My friend." She asked if you were my son's friend. Her tone was steady, but I could feel the nerves underneath. "What did you say?" I said yes. "Oh." She turned to me then, fully, and it hit me how wrong that sounded. How strange this is. You, me, the way we keep finding each other. I didn't have an answer. The truth sat between us, heavy and uninvited. "I can't explain it," I said finally. I stopped. "It's like the world goes quiet when I'm near you." Her eyes softened, and for a moment, the tension drained. But only for a moment. A wind passed through the trees. Leaves scattered across the path. She reached for her scarf as it slipped from her shoulder, and instinctively, I helped, fingers brushing the fabric, then her hand. We both froze. She didn't move. Neither did I. "I shouldn't," she whispered. "I know." Her hand stayed under mine a second. Longer, one heartbeat too long. Then she pulled away, gaze lowered. "You're too young to carry this kind of silence," she said. I almost said something, anything, to break it, but the words stayed trapped somewhere in my chest. We sat like that until dusk, until the air turned colder and the first streetlight flickered on. When she finally stood, she looked at me, really looked, and said quietly, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd met at a different time?" I didn't answer, because I knew the question wasn't meant to be answered. It was meant to linger, like everything else between us. So I might not be around much. Right? Her eyes flicked up, a quick, searching look. "You don't have to sound disappointed." "I'm not." She smiled, faint but knowing. "You are." We let that hang there, between the ticking clock and the faint hum of rain still clinging to the air. At one point, she reached across the table, maybe to move her cup, but her hand stopped halfway. Hovered. I could feel the warmth from where I sat. Then, just as quick, she pulled back. "I should," she started, then didn't finish. The front door creaked. A voice called faintly from outside. Her neighbor, maybe. She stood too fast, bumping her chair. I looked away, pretended to check my phone. The moment folded into itself like it had never happened. She came back a minute later, smoothing her sleeves, pretending it was nothing. "You should probably go before it rains again," she said. Her tone was careful, neutral. I stood, nodded, and found my voice somewhere between apology and habit. "Yeah, sure." When I reached the door, she followed, but didn't open it right away. Her hand rested on the knob. Mine hovered near it. We stood too close. Close enough that I could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, hear the tiny hitch in her breath. She looked up, eyes soft but unsure. "I never meant to," she whispered, then stopped. The space between us felt charged, not with what was said, but what almost was. For a heartbeat, I thought she might close that space. Then she stepped back, just slightly. "Good night," she said. The word came out too gentle, too final. I left before she could see the hesitation in my step. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. I could still feel the warmth of her hand that never touched me. The next morning, she was gone. Not gone in the way people leave, but gone in the quiet, deliberate way someone starts closing a door before you notice it. Her curtains stayed drawn. The light in her kitchen, the one that always glowed past midnight, stopped appearing. Even her car, always parked just slightly crooked by the curb, wasn't there anymore. At first, I told myself she was busy, visiting her son, maybe, or just taking space. But days turned into a week, and the silence between us began to feel less like a pause and more like an answer. I saw her again by chance at the grocery store. She was by the produce aisle, hair tied back, expression composed, too composed. She noticed me before I could look away. "Hey," I said. "Hi." Her smile was small. "Careful. How have you been?" I asked. "Good," she said too quickly. "Just keeping busy." There was a cart between us, and a wall of unspoken things behind it. "You disappeared," I said, before I could stop myself. She looked down at the apples in her hands. "I had to." "Because of me?" She didn't answer, just set the fruit down and adjusted her scarf, the same one from the park. "I saw my ex last week," she said quietly. "He came by to fix something around the house." I waited. "He asked if I was seeing anyone." "And you said?" I said no. The way she said it, soft, steady, final, it didn't sound like a confession. It sounded like a line drawn gently across the sand. We stood there a moment too long. Then someone passed by with a cart, and she stepped aside, breaking whatever thread had been holding us together. "You should focus on things that make sense," she said. "You have your whole life ahead." I almost laughed. "And you don't." She looked at me then, the kind of look that holds 1,000 unspoken things and still refuses to let any of them out. "I've already lived through the parts that teach you how easily people vanish," she said. And then she turned. I wanted to follow her, to say something that might fix the quiet breaking between us. But I didn't. That night, I wrote a message. "I don't care what anyone thinks. I just want to see you again." I typed it, read it, deleted it, typed it again, then stared at the screen until it dimmed to black. Outside, her window stayed dark. The bench at the park was empty the next evening. The cafe chair by the window, too. It wasn't heartbreak, not really. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was late evening when I saw her again, standing on her porch, the light above her door flickering against the fog. She wasn't expecting me. I hadn't planned to go. But my feet carried me there anyway, like they'd been meaning to for weeks. She didn't move at first when she saw me across the street, just folded her arms, like she was deciding which version of herself to be. Then she gave a small, tired smile. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know. Then why are you?" I didn't have a good answer. I just shook my head, laughed quietly. "Because I keep thinking about everything I didn't say." She hesitated, then opened the door a little wider. "Come in before someone sees." The house looked the same. Calm, tidy, full of things that belonged to her. The faint smell of soap, the stack of unread books, the half-drunk mug of tea left near the sink. She stayed by the counter, one hand resting on the edge. "You shouldn't make this harder than it already is." "I'm not trying to," I said. I don't know how to stop thinking about you." The words came out quieter than I meant them to. She froze for a moment, eyes lowered. "You're too young to feel that kind of ache," she whispered. I took a breath. Then maybe it's not age. Maybe it's just real. Her expression flickered, something between disbelief and longing. She looked away, exhaled softly. "You don't know what you're asking for." "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "I just needed you to know." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was heavy, but familiar, the kind that sits between two people who've already said everything in other ways. She turned, slowly, leaning back against the counter. I told myself it would fade, that what happened was just loneliness pretending to be connected. Was it? Her eyes met mine. No. The word landed like a quiet break in the air. She smiled then, barely, but enough to feel like light returning. "You're going to move on from this someday," she said. "And when you do, I hope you remember it kindly. Not as something wrong, just something that reminded you you were capable of feeling." I stepped closer, not enough to touch, but close enough to see the reflection of the kitchen light in her eyes. "I'll remember," I said. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she reached up, brushed her fingers against my sleeve. A small, trembling gesture that said everything words couldn't. Her voice was almost a whisper. "Okay." I nodded. "Okay." She smiled, half sad, half relieved. And that was it. No grand confession, no promises. Just two people standing in a quiet room, knowing something had ended, or maybe just settled into something gentler. When I left, she didn't follow me to the door this time, but I could still feel her hand on my arm. Steady, human, enough. Seasons changed without asking permission. The rain turned into long, patient mornings, sunlight spilling through curtains instead of thunder waking the street. I still walked past her house sometimes, out of habit more than hope. The curtains stayed open now. Sometimes I saw her reading by the window, a mug in hand. Life didn't stop. It never do. But it slowed, like it wanted to give us room to breathe. We found our rhythm again, not with the same intensity, but with a kind of quiet steadiness. I started helping her with small things around the house. Fixing a loose hinge, carrying groceries, drinking tea that always went lukewarm because we got lost in talking. She stopped pretending we weren't what we were, and I stopped pretending I didn't care. It wasn't a secret anymore, just something we didn't announce. Her son came home once, a quick visit between semesters. I met him at the gate, shook his hand, smiled like any neighbor would. When he left, she stood beside me on the porch, watching his car disappear. "Does it ever feel strange?" I asked. She thought about it. "It used to. Not anymore." Months folded into something softer. We'd meet at the park bench sometimes, the same one where everything had cracked open. I'd bring black coffee, she'd bring tea. At 8:47 one morning, she handed me a book she'd finished. "You'll like this one," she said. "Because you did?" She smiled. "Because it says the things we never say out loud." I read it later that night. She was right. Every line felt like it was quietly written about us, about the spaces between what's said and what's felt. There was no defining moment when it became love. No kiss that changed everything. It happened the way light fills a room, slow, unnoticed, until it's just there, and you realize you haven't been living in the dark anymore. Sometimes she'd fall asleep on the couch with the book still open on her chest. I'd make tea instead of coffee because it felt more like her. She still had that scarf from the park. I still kept her first text, "You left your umbrella at the cafe," pinned at the top of my messages. One morning, while she was watering the plants, I waved from across the street, just like that first day. She looked up, laughed quietly, and shook her head. Then she waved back. No hesitation this time. It wasn't the start of anything new. just proof that something old had finally settled into peace. I think about it sometimes, how small things begin. A wave, a cup of tea, a bench under a tree. None of it felt extraordinary then. But somehow, it all became enough. And maybe that's what love really is. Not the rush, not the confession. Just the quiet certainty that, after everything, someone will still meet your eyes across the street and understand without needing to speak. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?